Warhammer 40K. You and Sage both played it there.
That's correct.
Both finished it. So I'm gonna let you guys discuss that game. So Sage and Ulysses will be giving their review for Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. Take it away, guys.
So this is my first experience with Warhammer, period, as a franchise. This is the first thing I've played. Spent like I maybe seen some footage here and there before this, but I didn't know much about this franchise at all until I got my hands on this. And Man, I mean, from the Warhammer IP itself, which just is a lot more impressive and fun than I had realized. I hear the name Warhammer 40K for probably 20 years, and I don't know, I just never thought to look into it or kind of really spend time understanding it. But I'm glad that I finally have. But even taking the IP aspect of it out, just from the gameplay here, I feel like you're getting the sort of third person kind of linear level shooter experience that I don't know if we've really had much of these since like the 360 PS3 era. Stuff like Gears of War or even the first Space Marine game that came out kind of around a similar time.
That was
There's so many games.
2013, I believe, was the first one.
It's like the last year of the 360 PS3 life cycle. But I feel like back then you used to get a lot of games kind of more in the style, and nowadays it's like a lot of things have moved to either being like God of War's, like open world, or you have maybe occasionally you get like a character action game or something like that. But this sort of kind of third person melee combo shooter, it kind of feels like it's calling back to an era of games that I really like and miss. So it's appealing to me on a few different fronts.
And then for me, I mean, I've been kind of doing a bit of a Warhammer deep dive recently, because I've been kind of just playing a whole bunch of the video games. Like I haven't read any of the books or watched any of the animations or anything like that. But no, Lord no, I don't have that kind of money. But there are quite a few games for Warhammer. Not all of them are good. And the last like really big ones were like in like the early to mid 2000s. And so this just kind of comes on the scene, and it's like maybe the first big game, like really big, that Warhammer's ever had. Because before that, it would probably be like Dawn of War, which is a huge RTS title, but RTS is not like the biggest genre as compared to like an action game, like a Gears of War kind of thing. And one of the things that I think this game does really well, because the thing about Warhammer, especially the more you sort of get into it, is that it has like this crazy sense of scale to it, right? Like we're talking millions of planets, trillions of soldiers and monsters all fighting each other all at the same time. And this game really reflects that because, like, you can see, just hordes and hordes of thousands of these creatures like running at you from across the landscape. And you're like, oh, that's a really cool background we got back there. And then they get closer and closer. And you're like, oh, wait, those are the enemies it expects me to fight just all at once.
It's like in the game, back on like the PS3 or the 360, you'd play an action game like this, like like a God of War 3, right? And you'd have these very impressive visuals. You'd go through a level and you'd see the background and you'd see whole armies going at it, and it would be this impressive background. But because of the tech of current gen gaming, you're able to make that like a fully interactive space, which is, I mean, yeah, it's so cool. Like you have games like Gears of War would have like a horde mode. This whole game feels like a horde mode in some ways.
Funnily enough, they're adding a horde mode. I don't know what that's going to be.
Very interested to see that. And that's another cool thing too to note about this is that this game is being supported, even though like there's a campaign And then there's like two entire separate multiplayer things. There's like a PvP thing, and then there's a co-op, you know, which is like its own kind of series of missions here. But this game is being updated with new enemy types, new weapons. So like it's also the kind of thing where if you pick this up, yeah, you can play through the story mode in, I don't know, probably 7, 8 hours. It's not super long, but you also have a reason to keep coming back to it. And then on top of that, difficulty settings also kind of change the way the game plays in a really cool way and kind of makes you have to adopt totally different strategies for how you're going to navigate these. I mean, it's pretty much combat the whole time, but how you're going to navigate these combat sequences and like what enemies you're going to prioritize getting rid of. You really start to have to put some strategy into it.
Yeah, and like, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, the class system I think is also pretty well implemented. It gives you a lot of replayability because all the classes do very specific things, and you get access to all of them in the co-op multiplayer. So even if you're not a big PvP guy like me, uh, you have a lot of gameplay variety that you can sort of go into. There's a lot of different weapons. They all have like weird upgrade paths and stuff. The one sort of ding I will have against the co-op mode is that it does feel a little grindy, right?
Yeah,
You have to spend a lot of time doing levels over and over in order to upgrade your gear, in order to be able to proceed to the next difficulty and all that. And there aren't a whole lot of different co-op levels at the moment. So there are only about 8. There were 6 at launch. They added 2 more. Supposedly they're working on more, but I don't know how many we're going to have by the time this game reaches the end of its roadmap. I suspect it won't be that many. If you really enjoy the levels, and they are very well made, you can probably keep playing them over and over for a while, but I feel like eventually they will run out of steam.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that. I think it's definitely the kind of thing where you do wish that they had a few more of them for sure, just for variety's sake. It's possible that like the new like enemy types that get added over time will help to spice that up, but it is
Yeah,
it
they
is
have
definitely more
added new
like
enemies and new weapons for you to play with over time already, and supposedly there's going to be another big update this month. I don't know what it'll add, but I don't know if it'll be enough over time.
yeah. I mean that's the kind of thing like any sort of game that has a kind of it's not live service, right? That's a different thing. But there are these kind of ongoing additional elements, right? And any game that promises that sort of thing, I feel like you have to have a lot frequently to really keep people engaged. But I mean, at the end of the day, luckily this game just also has a very strong campaign mode that it can even if you play none of the co-op multiplayer stuff, you can just have a good time with this campaign, and then put the game down, say goodbye to it. And I think you can have that and end up being pretty happy with it. Now it is short too. I will say it is on the shorter side. I depending on like your skill level on like normal difficulty, I'd say between 6 and 8 hours for the story mode. Would you say
I
that's
know.
about fair?
I would say that. I know I flew through it on hard even. That only took me maybe like 9 hours. So it's definitely not a long game.
Uh,
So
have you all
I
said
do think it. Oh,
what
sorry.
the story is of the game? Have you all said that yet? With the
So there's. I feel like Ulysses will be better equipped to tackle this because
Yes,
I feel like
so this
just a lot going
is
on.
this is like a sort of a soft reboot of the Space Marine franchise, if you could call it that. I mean, it is now, but it wasn't really before this, because you had the original Space Marine, which is about this guy, Captain Titus, and it's that game sort of does a lot of setup for this that isn't in this game. There are quite a few references and characters and things like that harken back to the first game, and it is very helpful to know those things when you're coming into this. However, you don't need to. Like Sage, you didn't play the first game like I did, so you didn't. Did you ever feel like there was a point where you needed to like have played the first one in order to really understand what was happening or what the characters were about?
No, not at all, really. I mean, it's the kind of thing where the world is such a massive backdrop, and you can clue into the fact that there is a lot going on and a lot of backstory and factions and characters and units and terminology being thrown around. But it does do a good job of having like, hey, here's like 4 or 5 characters. You get a pretty decent sense of their personalities, how they interact with in like this military unit. You know from right away that this main character has had punishments in the past for some sort of transgression against the Empire. He's been punished. He's kind of come back from that punishment, and he's very suspicious of being and very careful about what he says as to not get accused of something again. Now I got all that without really any knowledge of the first game, so.
Yeah, and that ties into the first game perfectly. If you have played the first game like I have, it is a much richer experience in terms of like the character writing and sort of the parallels that are drawn between a couple of the characters in this game versus in the first one. But you don't need that to have a good time, to have a good story that's worth playing through. And I would say that the writing in this is better than what you would get out of, say, Gears of War or other games of its style.
And to piggyback on that too, I also think not only is the writing I think a lot better than say like a Gears of War, and that's not even to put Gears of War down. I've enjoyed Gears of War games. I think they're fun. But
Yeah, I mean, I like
when
Gears of
you
War.
yeah when you come into this, at least from this fresh kind of newcomer perspective, you see in this Warhammer game a lot of, oh, this is where Gears of War got that. Or this is why Gears of War has a chainsaw sword, because Warhammer has a chainsaw sword. The size of these characters and the way they move and the style of combat that they're engaging in. You can see its influence across. Doom is very inspired by Warhammer. You can see Warhammer's influence on all these other things in pop culture once you start to look at it and start to kind of understand it a little bit. And I think, like I was saying, the other thing that makes it, I think, better than other games of its type is just the world itself. The Gears of War, again, putting it down, but it is very kind of gray brown. Like a lot of action games on the PS3 360 were. They had that like a lot of games were like military set in like either post-apocalypse or desert setting, and so there's not a lot of color, like colorful like blues and greens and reds and a lot of that stuff. But here you get very, very vibrant, like, these the blue on their suits to the, green of like mucus of like these like environments and like the attacks that the creatures are spitting out at you. There's a vibrancy to its world. Like you see, the kind of magic that's being used by certain characters, and there's this beautiful like kind of purple blue like kind of residue of magic being left around everywhere. And there's just a lot of very immediately memorable visual styles and visual components to it. And even when it is like grungy and on a battlefield, the reds of the explosions pop really well against the dirt, and the green of the enemy's attacks also pop against that environment. So even at its least colorful, it's still way more colorful than these other types of games. So just visually, I found it to be such a pleasing, just eye candy experience.
I think part of the reason it's like that is because the tabletop itself, it's intended for you to be able to like paint your armies or whatever. And so it's kind of a sort of a tradition within the tabletop and the lore based around it and selling the models and whatnot to make everything easily differentiated by color and shape, and to have all these wild schemes so you can sort of tell everything apart at a glance. And I think the game is very faithful to the source material in that sense of clearly taking those sorts of designs and not just going, oh, the power armor has to be shaped like this or whatever, but taking that idea of this color of like easily readable enemies and factions and working them into the gameplay mechanics in such a way that it makes it very fun to play, because it makes like enemies' attacks and maneuvers very readable, which is helpful since the game is so heavily based on parrying and dodging and all that and targeting the enemy at the right time. And So I think just the way that the presentation works sort of fits in very well with what the game is trying to accomplish, both in terms of presenting the world to a new audience and in just being fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just that basic gameplay is incredibly engaging minute to minute. It is similar in some ways to the experience of maybe playing something like, like Doom 2016 or maybe not Eternal because Eternal is so fast, but certain action games of that type where you feel like you're very kind of constantly dealing with something. There's not a lot of downtime. There's no room to get bored. Really, I feel like with the game, unless
No,
unless you're doing the replay thing later. But like that first time through, like it's every corner there is something happening, and yeah, I love that. There's no open world. There's no traversal sequences. It's like you are here to slaughter giant masses of monsters, and you spend the 99% of the time playing this doing exactly that.
I do think there's a little bit of a traversal thing, but that's mostly like the jetpacks, which I think are really fun. I
True,
love that
true.
about the first game, and I'm so glad that they brought them back and refined them a little more for the second game. That was easily my favorite thing in this series overall is the jetpack combat. And they
You
even
get
gave
to
you a couple other classes that do that kind of thing.
you get to
Oh, you're
go right up into the air and then bring your gigantic warhammer down. And I mean it's like this. I really would like. You don't have to care about the lore or getting into the universe to play this game. You could just be like, oh hey, I like God of War. I want to play a violent action game. I like Doom. I'd like another game maybe a little bit like that. Like really, really, if you just like a good, fun, buttery smooth action game, I feel like this could be easily recommendable to pretty much anybody. Um, because like Ulysses was saying, it's a very good window for a new audience to come into this.
Okay. So yeah, like Ulysses was saying, it's basically like a reboot there of the series there. So you don't have to have any incredibly hard ties to it. Very beginner friendly for that to get into this. Um, and this is doing incredibly well. This is as of January 16th, 2025. Says the player count has surpassed 6 million. Now, by
Wow.
October of 16th, 2024, the game has sold 4.5 million copies. So it's done well there. Review wise, it's gotten decent to really good reviews there. It's gotten, yeah, some people 4 out of 5 there. Metacritic is giving it 80s out of 100 there. So it's kind of getting some decent, generally favorable reviews there. Now, this game came out last year in 2024, and it was nominated for a bunch of awards there. The Golden Joystick Awards, had Game Awards and the Steam Awards. For the Game Awards, it was nominated for Best Action Game and Best Multiplayer Game.
Hmm.
I think didn't Black Myth Wukong win for Best Action Game?
Black Myth
I
Wukong
think
won
so,
Best Action.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's a better action game than something like Black Myth Wukong? Or?
I think Black Myth Wukong is still ultimately the better game. I think that has it's got the RPG elements. There's a lot more variety in terms of you know that game can take you 50, 60 hours. There's 80 bosses. There's all these different things, different strategies to employ, secrets to find. And it's not Black Myth Wukong is not open world, but it is certainly a much bigger open area traversal system. Whereas here, I mean, it really feels like an old school game in that you are going through these very linear, very straightforward levels. Maybe there's like a corner you can go find like a secret in or an extra in, but there's not like a lot of room to go exploring here. Like you are mostly on a straight path the whole way through, in a good way, like a Uncharted 2 way or a God of War 2 way. Certain more like that. Black Myth Wukong is just a very different design philosophy entirely.
Hmm,
Yeah,
interesting.
I would agree with that. I would say that that Warhammer it's a very tight experience. It crams as much of itself as it can into a fairly small, compact area, but it doesn't have the room to really have the kind of stuff that a game like Black Myth would have.
Hmm, okay. Yeah, I know some people don't like that. They don't like the big open world experience there, the Breath of the Wilds. They don't like all that. They do like a strict,
I don't like that game. That's too big.
the Elden Rings. I know some people don't like that. The people just like, listen, I just like to go from point A to point B. I don't like all this other shit going on in it. Just give me that one. Okay, so it has that going on for people. And like you said, the story mode not very long. It's only your listeners were saying what 8, 9 hours.
Yeah,
I'd
that
say
was on
6 to 8
hard too.
on like a normal. Yeah, that was a hard mode play. I'd say if you're playing on normal, 6 to 8, somewhere in there.
And how much is this game?
It is. Well, at least when it first dropped, it was like a $70 full price game. And so that's where I am gonna say, depending on if it's on sale or not. Especially if you just want to play through the story once and then put it down and not touch it again, $70 is a bit much for something that's I think that short. Um, I was very lucky to be able to get this game free. I think I got the $100 like gold edition with the season pass even for free. So like I was very very lucky with this one. And so the experience of playing it was not weighed down at all by how much I spent on it. But I do think that there could be a good argument of waiting for it to be on sale to pick it up just because of the length. That also depends on what you're looking for. Do you just want to play the story, put it down, walk away? Do you want to get into the multiplayer? Do you care about that? Because if you're going to put a ton of hours into the multiplayer and that's super engaging, well then maybe the $70 price tag is totally worth it. I think it just kind of depends on what you're looking for from the game.
Okay. So
I will say that as a Warhammer fan, or Warhammer enjoyer at least, I did wait for this to go on sale.
So I see here on Steam, so they got a sale going on right now. It ends March 20th. So by the time you probably hear this, that sale will probably be done by the audience. But so it says here for the standard edition, you can get it for $38.99. For the gold edition, you can get it for $58.49, and for the ultra edition, you can get it for $64.99. So
Yeah, that seems like a good sale, a good fair sale price. Like just the base game, $38. I feel like that's totally reasonable.
I know when I got it, it was 25% off, and that was absolutely worth it, 100%.
now Amazon here. So if you want to get it on console here, PlayStation 5, it's $62.99. So it's 10% off right here, $62.99. That GameStop, it's there for $60. I see that.
So it's basically everywhere it's come down at least a little bit.
Yeah, it's come down a little bit there. Okay, so you think if somebody paid $60 for it, you think that if the standard edition, if they got that, that'd be?
I think I really think it depends on how much into the multiplayer you want to get. Like if you're like, yeah, I know I'm gonna play the multiplayer. $60, get it. If you know that you're just gonna play the single player mode and then never touch it again, I'd say maybe wait until like it's like 50 50 or lower. I mean, like, that's not to be like a slight against the game because I greatly enjoyed it, but 6 to 8 hours, if that's all you're going to play, it's not that much content.
Yeah. And you just spoke about Split Fiction, which was double the time and less the price at about $50. Okay.
Yeah, I would also have to agree with that. Unless you're really into Warhammer and you just can't wait to play this, or if you really know that you're going to be spending a lot of time in the multiplayer, which really is just like the meat and potatoes of the experience, then definitely don't get it full price.
Okay. So, Ulysses, what would be your final thought and rating for Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2?
I would say that this is an excellent game. This is a lot of fun. Graphically, it'll blow you away. You'll have a great time whether you're into either the story or the co-op multiplayer. I can't speak to the PvP. I did not play that, but overall, I would give this a pretty high rating. Not peak, but what's the one below that?
Tune in.
Tune in. Yeah, I would give this a high tune in. The reason I wouldn't give it a peak is, again, for some of the issues that we brought up with the pricing and with it getting a little grindy once you played it enough. But if you just want like a fun beat 'em up sort of action game with a good story, go for it.
Okay. And you said, the difficulty also, if you're looking for a good challenge, if you are somebody who is familiar with playing like games like God of War or Doom, probably not the most challenging experience there for you.
Absolutely not. It's definitely not that hard of a game once you get down to it. Unless, of course, The exception I will make to that is if you play the co-op modes on the higher difficulties, those can get nuts. The base campaign is really easy compared to the high-level co-op missions.
What about you, Sage? Final thoughts rating for Warhammer.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right in the same spot. I think I'd give it a very high tune in, like bordering on peak, but just not quite all the way to it. Yeah, like I said, for that pricing thing, I mean, obviously we played. I mean, let's see some of the multiplayer, so we were able to get that out of the game and get that content out of it. But certainly, yeah, if you're just playing the single player mode, it's not a lot. So I would wait to come down in price a little bit, and uh, if you if you pick it up at that $50, I think is even pretty good for that. And if you're going to get into the multiplayer and you know that you want to spend time on that, then even better. And then maybe at the higher price point, it's worth it. I think the game is incredibly tightly wound, though. It's buttery smooth. Even like in multiplayer, uh, there's one or two crashes that happen, but I do think that was probably more due to our internet connections than the game itself. Um, and in that multiplayer, the frame rate is like perfect. At least it was for me the whole time. I was like, it felt like very consistent. It looked good. It never felt like it was getting in any way like laggy or pixelated at all. Um, and then I also want to touch on as I give my final rating, some of the just visual language of the story and the cutscenes, especially in like the third act of this game. It's just some really cool. It's kind of crossing the boundary between science fiction and fantasy. Like it's that science fantasy subgenre that like Star Wars occupies. There's bits of both in there, but from just like the scale of like creatures on the screen and just kind of cinematography of the cutscene and the presentation just being really impressive. Heavy metal album cover imagery, right? Like just really, really great stuff to look at. Yeah, I just had an absolute blast with it. Especially as it goes more and more on sale, I would highly recommend it to anybody that likes action games.
Okay. So two good tune in for Warhammer 40K Space 22. If you can pick it up now, like you said, I mean, hey, if this releases the floor or on March 20th, you can pick up on sale right now on Steam. So I think $40 isn't bad. Yeah, for the standard edition
Oh
there with
no!
this game, 9 hours
Oh,
gets you.
and it's crossplay.
And okay, so if somebody has it on Xbox and you had it on PlayStation, you can play with another person there who has that. But who has an Xbox anyway? I mean, come on. But hey, somebody have a PC. You got a PC there, so you can play.
That's exactly what we did. I played it on
Yep.
the PlayStation. Ulysses was on the PC.
That. So awesome stuff there. So that was Sage and Lucy's thoughts on Warhammer.